if we were to have an environment such as this, and we see that the perimeter of our network is getting queried, let's say we've got branch offices, R5, 6, 7, 8. We see those and we're going, you know what? We shouldn't query those networks ever. We shouldn't query R5 and R6 and R7 and R8. Why? Because they don't have the routes you're looking for. I think about Star Wars, A New Hope. These are not the routes you're looking for. These are not the droids you're looking for. That's what EIGRP Stub brings to the table. What it does is it says, do not query me. I don't have any answers to any questions you might ask of me. And that should make sense. Think about individuals. You may not ask that individual any questions because you know that they don't have the answer. Same is true for routing. Not to demean these routers. So what we do is this. We use EIGRP Stub. We would do this at the perimeter of our network and say, please don't query these routers. And so therefore, we are scoping the queries at this point. R3 and R4 will not query R5, 6, 7, and 8 because R3 and R4 will understand by viewing their neighbor table that their neighbors of R5 through R8 are stub routers. This is going to enhance your EIGRP autonomous system. We do need to be masters of the EIGRP options for Stub. They are very, very important to master. So let's go through. We do this command EIGRP Stub. Now there are parameters that follow that we can utilize, but I don't need to use any parameters for this to be meaningful, impactful, and probably the way we want it to run. Here's why. When we do EIGRP Stub, we get the defaults if we don't tack on any extra keywords. Connected and summary routes will be advertised via the dynamic routing protocol. Now what that means is this. Connected routes are those that are connected to the router. Specifically, if we had networks, say we had some networks hanging off R5, R6, R7, those would be advertised via connected. Those would be advertised via connected, assuming we had a network statement that indicated the network space of those. Okay. Then we have summary. If you manually summarize anything, well then we probably want to advertise that summary. So you also get summary behavior. Now let's say that wasn't perfect behavior for you. Let's say we needed to control this. If we desire redistributed static routes to be advertised via EIGRP and a stub router, we could do the static keyword. So redistribution is often injection of external routes into the routing table, and we often get it from other dynamic routing protocols. If I use the static keyword, this only applies to the following. If I say static, that would apply if and only if I had a command that looked something like this: redistribute static. And then there's some metric values we have to put in to make that value work perfectly. So our focus is not to teach you about redistribution yet, but the static keyword would only apply to static routes that happen to be imported into EIGRP. Whereas the redistribute would apply to all other routing protocol sources. So the thing is, this says, this is pretty specific. I'm not going to capture that with just the redistribute. I'm only going to capture static routes redistributed with static. if I, let's say, redistribute OSPF, let's change that. If I had something like this, OSPF, then I would want the keyword redistribute. To spell it correctly. So we're saying what can be advertised. Let's not lose sight of that. It's easy to lose sight. What gets advertised via the stub router is controlled via these options. Do you want network statements to apply? Then connected. Do you want those summary routes that you have crafted to be advertised? Then you want summary. Static. If you have redistributed static, then you will advertise them if you have static. Dynamic routing protocols, if you've redistributed those, they would be advertised. And finally, receive only. This one is a break your network sort of thing, unless you did not have any networks behind the router. Let's say your router was functioning not as a router, but maybe a test. You were doing an IPSLA test where you're going to be emanating a lot of information and you want full routing information on that router, but there's nothing behind it. Then you would do receive only. But if you ever see receive only in a test in the real world, that needs to trigger lots of warnings. Alarms should be going off. So let's apply this to our environment. Where would we do it? And how do we verify? How do we verify? So let's say I go to R7. I would want you to tell me why I would choose R7 as a stub router. There are multiple ins, but this is not really a router that we want to be a transit router. We don't want it to be a stepping stone. So I'm going to say enable, and you know what? I'm going to go over to an adjacent router also, because I want you to see something really great. So I'm going to do a show IP EIGRP neighbor, and I have to do a detail. So I want to show you something. Right now, my neighbor to R7, which of these? It's out fast Ethernet 2, so it's this top one. Right now, there's nothing special going on. I just got detailed information, but there's nothing important to see from that detail yet. But I need it for comparison and contrast. Then I'm going to do the following. I'm going to go into EIGRP, and I'm going to say EIGRP stub, and we're going to see all of those. We're not going to worry about leak map. It's not relevant to our discussion, but the rest are. Now I'm just going to press enter, and I want you to tell me which options I got with EIGRP stub. Should get a few of those options. Which are they? Is it just one? Is it two? Well, let's up arrow and look at our detail command now. When you do show IP EIGRP neighbors detail, it will in fact tell you if the router is being perceived as a stub. So now R5 will not query R7. It believes it knows everything that R7 can share already. And what it will share is connected and summary routes. Very important. Very important behavior. Again, if I do receive only, that's probably there to break your network. Probably not a good thing, because if I did a receive only, I wouldn't see 192 anymore. I wouldn't see 172.16.32.192, because it would say R7 is not advertising any routes, regardless of the network statements that might be present. So a plain vanilla EIGRP stub does a lot of good for us, assuming we're doing it in the right place in our topology.